What is the worst betrayal a child can inflict? Imagine sipping morning coffee and discovering you own a $520,000 penthouse you have never seen. The mastermind behind that forged signature was my own daughter. When I refused to fund her greed, she sued me for $850,000. But she forgot I am no easy target, and our judge had a question sharp enough to expose everything. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Aurora Olson. I am 46 years old and as a mid-level operations director at Veridian Pulse Dynamics in Denver, Colorado. My life revolves around mitigating disasters. I analyze system failures, patch vulnerabilities, and ensure our corporate infrastructure remains completely impenetrable. It is a high-pressure environment demanding cold, calculated logic. When you spend 10 hours a day anticipating worst-case scenarios, you start to believe you are thoroughly prepared for anything. But absolutely no corporate risk assessment could have braced me for the devastating betrayal that was about to walk right through my office doors. It began on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. The Denver skyline was a biting crisp blue outside my floor-to-ceiling windows. I was halfway through my second coffee drafting a stern email to the engineering department when the front desk receptionist knocked on my glass door. She handed me a heavy overnight express envelope from a major national bank. I sliced it open expecting a routine escrow update for a corporate account. Instead, I pulled out a thick stack of glossy, legally binding mortgage documents. The property address was located in Cherry Creek, the most exclusively overpriced luxury residential district in the entire city. The loan amount stared back at me in stark black ink, $520,000. My pulse hammered against my throat. I had absolutely no intention of moving to Cherry Creek, nor had I ever applied for a $500,000 loan. Frantically, I flipped to the final signature page. My stomach dropped into a bottomless abyss. Right there on the line designated for the co-borrower was an astonishingly precise forgery of my handwriting. Before I could even process the sheer magnitude of this felony, the intercom on my desk buzzed loudly. Security informed me that I had 2 unexpected visitors waiting in the lobby. I grabbed the stack of forged papers, fully intending to march down there and immediately call the bank's fraud control department. However, as I rounded the corner past the security turnstiles, I froze. Standing there with unnervingly bright, rehearsed smiles were my 26-year-old daughter Chloe and her husband Blake. Blake was the absolute embodiment of an arrogant tech bro perpetually chasing the title of a visionary entrepreneur. He lived in expensive fleece vests and pristine white sneakers, currently running a mediocre fitness tracking startup that drained money rather than making it. Chloe practically skipped over to me, grabbing my arm and dragging me away from the curious eyes of my colleagues. She pulled me straight into an empty, soundproof glass conference room, with Blake sauntering in right behind us, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. "Surprise, Mom?" Chloe squealed loudly, clapping her hands together. "We bought a house. Well, it is actually a gorgeous luxury condo, but it is absolutely perfect for us." I stared at her, my mind desperately trying to reconcile her cheerful, bubbly tone with the mountain of fraudulent paperwork burning a hole in my hands. "Chloe," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. "What exactly is this? Why is my name listed as a co-borrower on a mortgage for $520,000? She rolled her eyes and waved her hand dismissively, treating the situation like a minor scheduling conflict. "Oh, please do not overreact. We just had to borrow your perfect credit profile for a little bit. Blake's fitness startup is in a really crucial seed funding phase right now, and we desperately needed all of our liquid cash for operational flow. The bank insisted on a co-signer with impeccable financial history. Since you are my mother, I obviously knew you would be thrilled to help us secure our future. It was just a silly little formality to get the keys handed over." The sheer entitlement in her voice made the room spin. "A formality," I repeated, gripping the papers so tightly my knuckles turned white. Chloe, I did not sign a single page of these documents. This is straight-up identity theft. This is a forged signature." At that moment, Blake stepped forward, completely dropping his friendly, goofy son-in-law facade. His smile twisted into something sharp, arrogant, and entirely brazen. "Aurora, let us look at this logically," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "This is simply a family investment. The ink is already dry. The keys are in our pockets. The bank is not going to care who actually held the pen as long as the first payment of $4,200 clears by the 15th of next month. And if it does not, well, it is your pristine hard-earned credit score that takes the catastrophic hit, not ours. You are a highly intelligent executive. I am entirely sure you will do what is necessary to protect your own assets." His words hung in the sterile air of the conference room, toxic and suffocating. This was not a plea for help. This was a calculated hostage situation. I turned my gaze back to Chloe, the daughter I had sacrificed everything to raise as a single mother since I was 20 years old. I searched her face for any trace of guilt, any flicker of hesitation or remorse. I found absolutely nothing. She just stared back at me with cold, expectant eyes. In that silent, devastating fraction of a second, the sacred bond of motherhood fractured, completely shattering into a million irreparable pieces. I did not scream. I did not shed a single tear. I simply turned around, pulled the heavy glass door open, and pointed toward the lobby. "Get out of my building," I commanded, my voice entirely devoid of any warmth or mercy. "Get out before I have security drag you out." They scoffed, exchanging a smug look before sauntering out of the room, fully convinced they had backed me into an inescapable corner. They thought they had won. But the moment the elevator doors closed behind them, I did not cry in the bathroom. I walked straight back to my desk. Within 20 minutes, I had placed a total lockdown freeze on every single one of my credit accounts. By hour 2, I was on a secure line with my corporate legal team. They had no idea who they had just crossed. In the immediate aftermath of that lobby encounter, a weaker version of myself might have collapsed. A normal mother might have wept over the shattered illusions of her family, desperately calling friends to seek comfort. I did not shed a single tear. My grief was instantly consumed by the icy mechanical precision I utilized every single day at Viridian Pulse Dynamics. I treat corporate disasters by dissecting the raw data, mapping the breach, and neutralizing the threat. I decided to treat my own daughter exactly the same way, viewing her actions as a critical system infiltration that needed to be aggressively audited. I bypassed the standard emotional mourning period and dove straight into tracing her digital footprint. I needed to know exactly how deep this infection went and how long it had been festering. Within 48 hours, I had mapped out every public transaction, social media check-in, and corporate registry tied to Chloe and her husband. But open-source intelligence was simply not enough to build a solid case. I needed military-grade digital excavation. I quietly retained the services of a private investigator based out of Boulder, a former cybersecurity contractor who specialized in tracking digital fraud and untangling complex financial webs. His retainer was remarkably steep, costing me $5,000 up front just to open the file. But the return on that investment was immediate and devastating. By the end of the first week, he had completely dismantled the grand illusion of Blake's fitness application. There was no revolutionary coding happening behind closed doors. There was no beta testing, no user acquisition strategy, no actual product, and certainly no venture capital interest waiting in the wings. The startup was nothing more than a hollow shell corporation carefully registered to provide a veneer of legitimacy. It existed solely to funnel fraudulently obtained funds into their extravagant lifestyle. The investigator sent me a heavily encrypted file containing their hidden financial routing. They were burning through roughly $10,000 a week on luxury Aspen ski resort rentals, VIP tables at exclusive downtown clubs, and high-end designer wardrobes. All of this was meticulously documented and carefully curated to project the image of highly successful, self-made young entrepreneurs on their social media platforms. It was an elaborate, expensive stage play, and my pristine credit score was the unwitting producer footing the massive bill. Yet one glaring anomaly remained unsolved. The mortgage documents required far more than just a forged signature on paper. To authorize a loan of over $500,000, the bank mandated a verbal confirmation from the co-signer to bypass their secondary security protocols and prevent identity theft. I had never spoken to a loan officer, nor had anyone called my personal device. I asked the investigator to pull the audio logs from the bank's verification department, utilizing a preliminary subpoena draft my legal team had prepared as leverage. When the audio file arrived in my secure inbox, the investigator attached a chilling note warning me to brace myself before listening. I pressed play. Through the high-fidelity speakers of my laptop, I heard my own voice echoing in the quiet office. The authoritative tone, the specific cadence, the slight rasp I get when I'm exhausted from back-to-back meetings, it was all perfectly replicated. The voice confidently confirmed my social security number, my exact annual income, and my enthusiastic willing approval of the property purchase. I sat frozen in my ergonomic desk chair, the blood draining completely from my face, leaving my skin ice cold. It was undeniably my voice, but I had never spoken those words in my entire life. The investigator called me minutes later to explain the terrifying reality. They had bypassed the bank's security checkpoint using advanced artificial intelligence voice cloning software, a tool readily available on the dark web for anyone willing to pay the subscription fee. The revelation struck me with the paralyzing force of a physical blow. To train an artificial intelligence model to perfectly mimic a specific human voice with all its unique vocal tics, it requires high-quality, isolated audio data. My mind raced backward, desperately searching for any recent moment I could have been recorded at length. Then the memory hit me like a runaway freight train. Last Christmas Eve. Chloe had been unusually affectionate that night, sitting closely beside me on the living room couch, constantly holding her phone up to record short, intimate interview-style videos. She had asked me endless trivial questions about my childhood in the Midwest, my career advice for young women, and my absolute favorite holiday memories. She claimed she was making a digital scrapbook for the family archives, a tribute to our bond. I had smiled, laughed warmly, and spoken clearly into her microphone for over 2 straight hours. That was not a sentimental bonding moment between a mother and her only child. That was a cold, calculated data harvesting operation. The intense pain that tore through my chest in that moment had absolutely nothing to do with the money. It was the sheer sociopathic premeditation of it all. I had worked 3 grueling jobs when I was 20 years old just to buy her winter coats. I had eaten cheap ramen noodles for months on end so she could have braces. I had built an entire life from the ground up completely alone, just to ensure she would never know the bitter taste of poverty. And she had weaponized my love, my memories, and my very voice to steal my future. The rage that finally settled into my bones was absolute and terrifyingly calm. I did not pick up my smartphone to scream at her. I did not send a furious, emotionally charged text message demanding immediate answers. In the high-stakes world of data security, telegraphing your counterattack to the enemy is a fatal mistake. Instead, I operated in total, suffocating silence. I instructed the investigator to forensically secure every single piece of evidence. We documented the exact digital timestamp of the artificial intelligence software purchase, which conveniently matched a charge on Blake's hidden credit card. We archived the geolocation data, proving they were sitting in the same room when the fake phone call was placed to the bank. We downloaded every single one of those Christmas videos before Chloe could realize her mistake and delete them from her cloud storage. I meticulously categorized the metadata, the financial transfers, and the forged documents into a secure encrypted drive. I was building an impenetrable fortress of hard facts. Chloe and Blake thought they were dealing with an overly emotional, forgiving mother who would eventually cave under the pressure of keeping the family unit intact. They had completely miscalculated. They were about to face a corporate operative who destroys catastrophic threats for a living. The storm was gathering on the horizon, and I was going to make absolutely certain they had nowhere left to run. The absolute audacity of the modern grifter is nothing short of a masterclass in psychological projection. While I was silently and meticulously compiling my digital fortress of evidence, Chloe and Blake were apparently growing incredibly paranoid by my complete lack of an explosive reaction. In their warped hyper-online reality, silence did not mean strategic preparation. It meant vulnerability. They assumed I was cowering in fear. So they decided to strike first. Exactly 3 weeks after the incident in the lobby, a thoroughly bored process server walked straight up to the reception desk at Viridian Pulse Dynamics and handed me a thick, heavy manila folder. I was officially being sued in a Colorado state civil court by my own daughter and her husband. The damages they were aggressively seeking, $850,000. I sat alone in my office, closed the blinds, and read through the legal complaint, letting out a sharp, incredulous laugh that startled my executive assistant on the other side of the glass. The document read less like a legally binding affidavit and significantly more like a rejected script for a terrible daytime soap opera. They were formally accusing me of, quote, fraud of trust, unquote, and a blatant malicious breach of a verbal contract. The utterly fictitious narrative they spun claimed that I had vehemently promised to fully finance their luxury real estate venture as a generous wedding gift, only to abruptly and cruelly withdraw my financial backing at the 11th hour out of sudden jealous spite. Furthermore, they were demanding massive compensatory damages for the alleged destruction of Blake's influencer reputation. The lawsuit seriously argued that my sudden withdrawal of support caused his entirely fictional fitness startup to lose critical momentum, costing him hundreds of thousands of dollars in projected future revenue. To top off this absolute mountain of perjury, Chloe boldly tacked on a claim for severe psychological distress. She argued that my emotionally abusive, controlling parenting style had left her deeply traumatized and unable to function in society without the stability of that Cherry Creek penthouse. The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy was staggering to behold. The very next morning, I received a follow-up email from their legal counsel. He was a notorious clout-chasing attorney who aggressively marketed himself on social media platforms as the ultimate defender of canceled internet personalities. His email was a thinly veiled extortion letter dressed up in polite, passive-aggressive corporate legalese. He magnanimously offered a path to peaceful mediation. If I simply agreed to assume full responsibility for the monthly mortgage payments of $4,200 and publicly apologized for my erratic behavior, they would graciously drop the $850,000 lawsuit. They actually believed they could weaponize the legal system to bully me into submission, treating the courts like a customer service desk, where they could complain loudly enough to get a free refund. I printed out the ridiculous lawsuit, grabbed the encrypted hard drive containing the private investigator's damning findings, and drove directly to the downtown financial district to meet with Valerie. Valerie was a veteran litigation attorney who possessed the warmth of a frozen steel beam and a terrifying reputation for completely dismantling her opponents in the courtroom. She did not coddle her clients, and she had zero patience for emotional theatrics. When I laid the massive stack of paperwork on her pristine mahogany desk, she skimmed through the pages with a look of absolute disgust, heavily wrinkling her sharp features. "This is pure concentrated garbage," Valerie stated flatly, aggressively tossing the legal complaint back across the desk so that it scattered across the wood. "This is a classic textbook psychological manipulation tactic. It is legal gaslighting at its finest. They are banking entirely on the fact that most normal, decent people are utterly terrified of the judicial system. They throw an absurd astronomical number like $850,000 right at your face, hoping you will panic. Exhaust your mental bandwidth and eventually settle for paying that mortgage just to make the nightmare go away. They want to bleed your patience dry until you surrender." I looked at Valerie, feeling the cold, familiar, analytical logic of my corporate training locking seamlessly into place. "I do not negotiate with terrorists, Valerie, whether they operate in a corporate server room or within my own family tree. There will be absolutely no settlement, no peaceful mediation, and certainly no surrender." Valerie leaned back in her expensive leather chair, a slow, highly predatory smile finally breaking through her icy exterior. "What are your exact instructions, Aurora?" "I want you to draft an immediate and ruthless countersuit," I commanded, my voice perfectly steady, completely devoid of any lingering maternal hesitation. File it for civil fraud, intentional infliction of financial damages, and egregious identity theft. But do not stop there. I want you to issue a merciless wave of subpoenas. I want court orders demanding the complete unfiltered server logs from that artificial intelligence software company. I want their internet protocol, addresses their banking transaction histories, and every single digital footprint tracing back to the exact moment they purchased that voice cloning program. I want to drag their entire manufactured fake reality out into the blinding, unforgiving light of a courtroom, and I want you to burn their fraudulent little empire completely to the ground. Exactly 3 weeks before our scheduled court date, my personal phone vibrated with an unexpected notification. It was a text message from Chloe, the very first direct communication since I had ordered her out of my corporate lobby. The message was brief, practically begging for a private meeting at a highly obscure, dimly lit coffee shop located on the far industrial outskirts of Denver. She claimed she needed to tell me the absolute truth, completely away from Blake and his overbearing influence. A younger, more naive version of myself might have felt a sudden surge of maternal hope, believing that my little girl was finally ready to break free from a toxic marriage and seek my protection. But the woman I had become over the past 2 months knew significantly better. This was not a reconciliation attempt. This was a strategic pivot. Before I left my house, I reached into my desk drawer and retrieved a specialized high-definition micro-recording device no larger than a standard flash drive. I clicked it on, verified the flashing green indicator light, and slipped it deep inside the side pocket of my leather handbag. Colorado is fundamentally a one-party consent state regarding the recording of private conversations. As long as one person involved in the discussion is fully aware that the audio is being captured, the resulting file is completely admissible in a court of law. I walked into that coffee shop armed not with maternal forgiveness, but with the cold, calculating precision of a trap waiting to be sprung. Chloe was already sitting in a back corner booth when I arrived. She had deliberately dressed for the part she intended to play. Her usually flawless camera-ready makeup was entirely absent, replaced by dark circles and a pale, exhausted complexion. She wore a faded, oversized sweater that made her look exceptionally small and fragile. The moment I slid into the booth across from her, she immediately launched into a highly rehearsed performance. The tears flowed instantly large and heavy, spilling over her cheeks as she reached out to grab my hands. "Mom, I am so incredibly sorry," she sobbed, her voice trembling with manufactured terror. "You have to believe me. I did not want to do any of this. Blake forced me. He told me that if his company failed, he would leave me, and I was just so terrified of losing my marriage. He controlled the finances he bought that voice software, and he made me practice those scripts. I am a victim here, Mom. You cannot let them send me to jail for something my husband made me do. Please, you have to drop the countersuit and make this all go away." I sat there in total silence, deliberately keeping my hands flat on the table, entirely out of her reach. I let her cry for 10 agonizingly long minutes. I watched the rhythmic heaving of her shoulders, the calculated pauses she took to gauge my reaction, and the way her eyes darted around to see if anyone else was witnessing her tragic performance. It was a masterful display of manipulation, but I felt absolutely nothing. My heart was completely hollowed out, replaced by the quiet, steady whir of the recording device hidden inside my purse. When she finally ran out of breath and the silence stretched between us, I looked directly into her eyes and spoke with an unnerving, flat calmness. "Are you completely finished?" The shift in her demeanor was instantaneous and genuinely terrifying to witness. The moment Chloe realized her crocodile tears were failing to penetrate my armor, the fragile, victimized daughter vanished entirely. Her spine snapped straight against the wooden booth. Her tear ducts seemed to instantly dry up, and the pitiful quiver in her jaw morphed into a hard, vicious sneer. The mask completely slipped, revealing the ruthless, entitled stranger hiding underneath. "You are making a massive mistake," she hissed, her voice dropping into a dark, venomous register that I had never heard before. "If you do not call off your attack dog lawyer and drop this entire case by Friday, we will absolutely destroy you. Blake has over 200,000 highly active followers across his platforms. All it takes is one single video. I will sit in front of a ring light. I will turn on the tears, and I will tell the entire internet that you subjected me to severe psychological and physical abuse for my entire childhood. I will say that you are a toxic, controlling narcissist who is now trying to ruin her own daughter's life out of sheer jealousy. She leaned closer across the table, her eyes wide with a manic, desperate energy. Do you honestly think your prestigious corporate board of directors at Viridian Pulse Dynamics will keep you around when a massive cancel culture mob starts flooding their corporate inbox? We will tag your chief executive officer. We will post your office address. We will burn your entire career to the ground. In this era, Mom, nobody cares about your boring legal truth or your stupid forensic evidence. They only care about who tells the saddest story on the internet. And I promise you, I am a much better storyteller than you are. The generational divide between us had never been more starkly illuminated. She truly believed that the transient, chaotic power of internet outrage could override the rigid, unforgiving architecture of the actual legal system. She thought a viral hashtag was a legitimate substitute for reality. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I simply reached out, picked up my glass of iced water, and took a slow, deliberate sip. I set the glass back down with a quiet clink that echoed between us. Go ahead, I said, my voice steady and cold as a winter storm. Post whatever you want. Cry for your invisible audience. But remember one crucial thing, Chloe. Your virtual world cannot pay for real prison. I stood up, grabbed my handbag, and walked out of the coffee shop without ever looking back. The device in my purse felt incredibly heavy, anchored by the weight of the irreversible truth it now held. Chloe had just handed me the final fatal blow. By threatening my career and attempting to coerce me into dropping a legitimate lawsuit, she had completely abandoned the realm of a messy civil dispute. That 30-minute audio file had officially escalated her actions into felony extortion and severe witness intimidation. The trap had firmly snapped shut, and she had no idea she was already locked inside. The heavy oak doors of the Denver County Courthouse closed with a resounding thud, sealing us inside a theater of absolute, unforgiving reality. The air conditioning hummed a low, sterile drone, chilling the polished wood of the defense table where I sat beside Valerie. Across the aisle, Chloe and Blake sat behind the plaintiff's table, radiating an arrogant confidence that made my stomach turn. Chloe had worn a modest floral dress, purposefully styling her hair to look young and defenseless, while Blake wore a somber navy suit playing the part of the earnest, aggrieved businessman. Their attorney, the social media litigator who had threatened me via email, launched into his opening statement with the theatrical flair of a man accustomed to performing for a camera rather than a judge. He paced forcefully back and forth across the carpeted floor, gesturing wildly toward me. He painted a heartbreaking, entirely fabricated portrait of my character. According to his impassioned monologue, I was an overbearing, highly controlling mother who had promised to provide a solid financial foundation for my daughter and her ambitious husband. He claimed I had eagerly encouraged them to find their dream home, only to cruelly and maliciously pull the rug out from under them at the absolute last second, intentionally pushing them toward total financial ruin simply because I was jealous of their independence. He spoke of broken trust, of shattered dreams, and of the profound emotional devastation that necessitated the $850,000 compensation they were seeking. Chloe dabbed her dry eyes with a tissue perfectly on cue. When the plaintiff's counsel finally sat down, looking immensely proud of his performance, the courtroom fell silent. The Honorable Judge Eleanor Vance, a woman with silver hair and eyes as sharp as cut glass, looked over her spectacles toward our table. Valerie stood up. She did not pace. She did not raise her voice to match the emotional pitch of our opponent. She simply adjusted her blazer, walked calmly to the center of the room, and signaled the court bailiff to dim the overhead lights. A high-definition projector hummed to life, casting a massive, blindingly bright square against the blank wall next to the witness stand. "Your Honor," Valerie began, her voice cutting through the quiet room like a surgical scalpel. The plaintiffs have told a highly compelling story today. However, in the realm of corporate litigation and fraud, we do not deal in stories. We deal in digital forensics. Valerie clicked a remote in her hand. A massive screenshot of an internal email thread appeared on the wall. The sender was Blake, and the recipient was a customer service representative at an overseas software company. Valerie read the text aloud, ensuring every single syllable echoed clearly. To confirm my premium subscription, I need unrestricted access to the behavioral voice cloning module. Valerie read her tone deadpan and ruthless. I am attaching 30 gigabytes of high-resolution audio files for the machine learning sequence. Please expedite the processing. Blake visibly stiffened in his chair. The smug confidence began to melt off his face, replaced by a sudden chalky pallor. But Valerie was barely warming up. Your Honor, the plaintiffs claim my client verbally agreed to a mortgage. Valerie continued, signaling a bespectacled man in a tweed jacket to take the witness stand. I would like to introduce our expert witness, a senior forensic audio analyst. He has thoroughly examined the verbal authorization recording secured by the bank. Valerie pressed a button on her laptop. My voice suddenly filled the courtroom, clear and authoritative, confirming the purchase of the luxury property. Chloe looked over at me with a triumphant smirk, clearly believing this was the moment I would be completely humiliated. But her victory was incredibly short-lived. The audio expert adjusted his microphone. Your Honor, I ran this bank recording through an advanced spectrographic analysis. Human speech is naturally flawed. When we speak, our pitch, our breathing patterns, and our vocal cord tremors vary by micromilliseconds. It is scientifically impossible for a human being to perfectly replicate the exact same acoustic signature twice. Valerie clicked her remote again. The projector now displayed two massive, complex wave graphs, side by side. One graph was labeled Bank Authorization. The other was labeled Christmas Eve Social Media Archive. I isolated the phonemes from the bank call and compared them directly to the audio extracted from the plaintiff's own holiday videos, the expert stated, pointing a laser pointer at the jagged peaks of the sound waves. The breathing patterns, the micro pauses, and the specific frequency of the vowels are a 100% identical match, down to the absolute exact decimal. This is not a recording of a human speaking new words. This is an artificial intelligence algorithm perfectly splicing old audio data together to manufacture a synthetic sentence. The voice on the bank recording is completely fake. A collective heavy gasp rippled through the small gallery of court reporters and clerks. The plaintiff's lawyer furiously whispered into Blake's ear, his face turning a vibrant shade of crimson. However, Valerie announced, turning her freezing gaze directly upon Chloe, if the court prefers to hear authentic human emotion, we have one final piece of evidence. Valerie played the hidden recording from the coffee shop. There was no visual aid this time, only the incredibly raw, damning audio echoing off the wooden walls. The courtroom listened in absolute frozen silence as Chloe's voice shifted from pathetic sobbing to vicious, calculating extortion. Everyone heard her threaten to unleash a cancel culture mob. Everyone heard her promise to falsely accuse me of severe abuse to destroy my corporate career at Viridian Pulse Dynamics. And everyone heard her boldly declare that the internet does not care about the truth. The atmosphere in the courtroom completely crystallized. The very last shred of Chloe's carefully manufactured victimhood was violently stripped away, leaving nothing but the ugly, undeniable reality of her greed. Total panic erupted at the plaintiff's table. Blake leaped to his feet, his chair crashing violently onto the carpet behind him. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at his own wife. I had absolutely nothing to do with that conversation, Blake shouted, his voice cracking with sheer terror as the reality of a felony conviction loomed over him. She went there on her own. She did this. The voice software was entirely her idea. I only paid for it because she told me to. Chloe spun around, her eyes wide with absolute fury and betrayal. You absolute coward. You are the one who needed the money for your pathetic failing business. You told me it was completely foolproof. They began screaming at each other viciously, tearing each other apart right there at the mahogany table, completely abandoning their unified front the second their survival was threatened. The polished facade of the perfect influencer couple shattered into 1,000 pathetic screaming pieces. Order! The Honorable Judge Vance roared violently, striking her heavy wooden gavel against the sounding block. The sharp, explosive crack of the wood cut through the chaotic screaming like a gunshot. "I demand absolute order in my courtroom right this instant." The screaming stopped, but the heavy, suffocating weight of their guilt remained fully suspended in the air. Judge Vance leaned forward over her elevated bench. Her severe, uncompromising eyes bored directly through the two terrified, trembling grifters standing before her, thoroughly dissecting the absolute wreckage of their miserable lies. The echo of the gavel faded into a heavy, suffocating silence. Judge Vance slowly removed her silver-rimmed spectacles, placing them deliberately on the polished wood of her bench. She leaned forward, her piercing gaze bypassing the bickering couple entirely and locking directly onto the plaintiff's attorney. "Counselor," the judge began, her voice a low, terrifying rumble that commanded absolute submission. "I invite you to look through your extensive theatrical pile of paperwork. Please take your time, and when you are ready, I want you to show me a single line, a single legally binding document proving that Mrs. Olson agreed to spend her entire life underwriting your client's insatiable greed and deception." The attorney stood frozen. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a pathetic, dry stammer escaped his throat. He slowly lowered the legal pad he had been clutching. His fingers went slack. A sleek pen slipped from his grasp and hit the mahogany table, producing a sharp, hollow click that echoed throughout the paralyzed courtroom. It was the undeniable sound of total surrender. Judge Vance did not wait for an answer. "The plaintiff's baseless lawsuit for $850,000 is hereby dismissed with extreme prejudice," she declared, picking up her pen. "Furthermore, I am immediately transferring this entire case file to the federal prosecutor's office. I am formally recommending immediate criminal indictments for felony wire fraud and aggravated identity theft." The aftermath unfolded with the brutal efficiency of the justice system they thought they could outsmart. The bank swiftly foreclosed on the luxury penthouse. Blake's arrogant facade crumbled completely during his criminal trial. Without the shield of a high-priced lawyer, he was sentenced to 3 years in a federal penitentiary. Chloe managed to avoid a prison cell, but the judge showed zero sympathy. She received 5 years of strict probation alongside a massive restitution order she had no way of paying. Stripped of her stolen wealth and fake online persona, my daughter found herself working the graveyard shift as a cashier, spending her nights scanning groceries instead of attending glamorous parties. When I finally walked out of that courthouse, I did not feel a single rush of triumphant victory. There was no joy in watching my child's life disintegrate. Instead, there was just an overwhelming, profound sense of relief. It felt exactly like waking up from a successful surgery. The deep gratitude of a patient who has just severed a malignant tumor called blind family loyalty. Within a week, I established an ironclad, irrevocable trust. Every asset I had built was placed securely behind a fortress of legal barricades. I allocated a significant portion of my wealth to finance advanced cybersecurity courses for struggling single mothers. I made absolutely certain that Chloe would never be able to touch a single dime of my legacy. As I took a long, quiet walk under the vast Denver sky, a profound peace settled over me. At 46 years old, after decades of relentless sacrifice, I finally understood my greatest truth. The most important lesson of motherhood was not learning how to love unconditionally. The most crucial survival skill I ever mastered was looking into the eyes of someone who expected me to break, and finally learning how to say the word no, preserving the absolute final shreds of my own dignity. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support James Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next SAS Stories.